I'm Ada Glazer.
Okay. And when did you first become associated with Temple Bethel?
We came here on November the 12th, 1941.
Okay. And when you say we came, who are you
My
talking
husband and I, who was then became the rabbi of Temple Bethel, he succeeded Dr. Leo Franklin.
Okay. And where were you coming from?
We came from New York at Temple Emmanuel, which is really the outstanding temple in the country. My husband was associate rabbi there for 8 years, and from there we came here when he became the rabbi of Temple Bethel.
What was the thing that struck you most when you got to Detroit?
I have to say, to this day, was the graciousness of the people here in Detroit. They really opened their arms up to us. The only problem was that we had no place to live, and that was the difficulty. But we minimized that, and we managed to get through.
What was it like those first few years in Detroit?
Well, they were exciting. They were exciting. It was the end of the war. Personally, I found it difficult with a baby to be living in a hotel for 7 months and then moving into a rented house that had problems for 2 years, then going back into another hotel for 2.5 years with my furniture again in storage, and having a little girl that had nobody to play with and no access to community things. It was difficult. Also, I didn't drive in those days. We couldn't afford a car, and it was difficult getting around on buses and streetcars. But we managed. I was at the temple all the time. Every activity, every service, I never missed anything.
What do you remember especially from those early days? Is there like one event or one thing that happened that you remember fondly?
Well, it was interesting. And Dr. Goldenson, who was the rabbi of Temple Emmanuel, we all came from Pittsburgh. It was an outstanding temple in Pittsburgh. He was very revered and loved. And he came to New York, and just shortly before we came here, an organization was formed called the Council for Judaism. And at that time, there were two factions, the Zionists, those that are Zionists, and those that were anti-Zionists. And it doesn't mean that they didn't get along, but those that were anti-Zionist did not believe in the having a state of Israel. And Dr. Goldenson, for whom I was secretary, that was one of the reasons why I went to New York with him, was an anti-Zionist. And this organization was formed after we left. And a couple of weeks after we left New York, my husband got a telephone call from Dr. Goldenson, the rabbi of Temple Emmanuel, asking my husband to be one of the co-sponsors of this organization, and he wanted his name on the stationery. And my husband said he'd have to think about it. Heretofore, when he was the associate rabbi, he went along with everything that Dr. Goldenson had hoped he would, believe in. And when he came here, he was his own person. And I remember keeping after him. If Dr. Goldenson asked you to do something, even now, why aren't you calling him? He says, I have to think about it. Finally, a week later, he said, you get on the other phone, and I want you to hear the conversation. I had no idea what it was about. And he said to Dr. Goldenson, I'm sorry, I cannot go along with this organization. I do not believe in it. I think it's divisive. And that was it, and I was absolutely appalled. But however, I have to say that my respect for my husband went up 1,001% that he made that decision. And I have to say that Dr. Franklin, his predecessor, was also in that organization, the Council for Judaism. And he came to my husband, I don't know how much later. My husband got up and spoke about it on the pulpit. why he felt the way he did and how necessary it was to support this little country. And Dr. Franklin heard him, and he subsequently came to him and he says, "Would you mind if I spoke from the pulpit?" And he says, "Well, sure." And he got up and he himself resigned from the Council of Judaism. And that stood out in my mind. And the whole group that loved and revered Dr. Franklin, I think they all resigned because of him. And what has been proven is that Israel subsequently became a state, and everything today is so different than it was then, as is Reform Judaism is different too. It's quite different than it was in our day. It was much more rigid, and I don't know. I think there's lots more warmth today in our services, but it's different. In those days, the rabbis were outstanding in giving sermons. They were very special, and there was a sense of respect for the rabbinate, and I think that held true for the Christian clergy too, that I think is very much missing today. It's not the same as we see in other professions. So that has always stood out in my mind. It really has. Mm-hmm.
Good, thanks. One of the things outside of Temple Bethel, have you been active in the community?
Yes, very much so.
Could you tell us more about that?
Well, I always loved the temple. I was always here. I still love the temple. I feel very deeply about it. I hurt when the temple hurts, and I'm happy when things are going well. I belong to a lot of organizations. I'm not physically involved now in Hadassah. I was in my earlier days in Women's American Art that I believe in very strongly. This is an organization that puts up technological schools for the young people who don't make it, academically. I'm very active to this day in Brandeis. Brandeis University is a university that is sponsored by the Jewish people. It is a secular university in that everybody is welcome. They have chapels for all the faiths, and it has grown to such a degree, and it is so outstanding that has been very much a part of my life. I sit on the board of the Detroit chapter even now. I work in their book depot every Monday and love it. We process the books that are brought in that people, are not using anymore. We mark them, pack them, and put them away until our next book sale, which is always outstanding. We're second in the country in raising money for the university. It's the women's group, and we furnish the library, and we do a lot for them. So this has been really my greatest contribution, I think, in my latter years. The National Council of Jewish Women has been very close to my heart, and I'm very involved in scholarship. I was chairman of the scholarship committee and a lot of other committees. I'm no youngster anymore, so I'm not as active as I used to be, but it's still part of my life. I can't even think of all the other things. I think I belong to almost everything, and I like to contribute to organizations that are needed. And I'm here when they need me. As a matter of fact, I think I'd like to get involved in something else again at my age.
That's wonderful. I guess one of the things that might be interesting is to look at the idea of the spiritual and religious life, and look at how it sets there's like a community within a community. Mm-hmm. So you have like the spiritual and religious life, and then there's the secular life, and how those balance out, and how one fits into the other. And you talked a little bit about ecumenical movement in Detroit. And
Right.
we talked about it with Jones and some other people.
Mm-hmm.
Could you speak a little bit about that?
Well, there's an organization for ministers called the Wranglers, and it's the group of Christian clergy, and my husband was a part of it. And I can remember his coming home and telling me some of the things that they used to talk about, and one of the things that stands out in my mind, he felt so close to the group that it was really wonderful. And he said one of the men, and I wish I remembered his name, one of the ministers said, they used to take a walk together, and he said, Glazer, I sure would like to convert you to Christianity. And I thought that was a nice compliment, you know, that they felt so close to each other. And by the same token, he was very close to the other part of the Judaism. Sharet Tzedek, the rabbi, was Rabbi Adler, who was outstanding. They worked together in the community. My husband was involved in everything. He was a doer and a fighter. And there isn't anything that came up that he wasn't involved in. St. Cyprian's Church gave him some certificates, I don't know, and everything for the work he did for them and worked with them. He spoke at all the churches. He was in constant demand, not only to speak at the churches, but he went around to the schools. He went around even to the nursing organizations. And every organization, I just couldn't believe where he found all the time to do this kind of thing. And he was very outgoing. He had a personality that he was gifted. He really was gifted because people responded to him. And I feel that was the wonderful thing about him. That why people loved him so, because he cared about them. One of my favorite words today is that people don't seem to have the caring. And this goes for professional people, and which is so important, you know, person to person. And this, from this kind of thing, the Wranglers or whatever, emanated this ecumenical institute that he started. And he had the foresight. At the temple on Gladstone, the women of the sisterhood would prepare the lunch. They'd make the hamburgers and everything. And in those days, the Catholics were not a part of it. They still hands off, you know, they weren't involved in it. But subsequently, believe me, they're very much a part of our institute. The sisters, the priests, everybody come to the institute. And it's a thrill for me because I'm very involved. And then 28 years ago, a group of people got together and decided that there ought to be a school named for my husband. And needless to say, there was a groundbreaking ceremony for it. My son, who was a youngster at the time, and I were the groundbreaking. And that was the beginning of a beautiful school that's on LaBelle and Ford, on 14th Street between LaBelle and Ford. And I haven't missed one graduation since that school was dedicated. And I give out dictionaries to the outstanding students. And I have to say, really, and if I'm prejudiced, it's okay. It is one of the finest schools, elementary schools that I've ever been in. It is run so beautifully. They're all black. There's a beautiful spirit there. I love coming in there. The children all respond. And I speak to the parents and the children on the day of the graduation. And I'm just entranced at what they accomplished. They have, I don't know how many clubs that these children belong to, anywhere from well, recently, Ameritech has set up a technological center in that school, the first one. And they have that now where these kids, I think they have like 36 computers, and they're way ahead of a lot of the schools. They were the first school to be given that kind of an opportunity. And every June I'm called, and they tell me how many children are the outstanding children, and I go out and buy the dictionaries. And I come there and I give them a talk always telling them what's good for them. And it's very exciting for me. And every year I say, I don't know that I'll be able to make it next year because I'm 85 years old. And I'm just grateful that I can still go down there. And this has really been a wonderful source of satisfaction to me and my family, and also the Ecumenical Institute, because my husband was very involved in education and also in interfaith activities. He traveled with a group of Christian clergy during the war for the National Conference of Jews and Christians. And he went around speaking to the soldiers and everybody. And he was really outstanding in anything that he ever did. That's my attitude, and I have beautiful, wonderful memories of him. And even people that had no claims on him, he was there for them. He was in the hospital regularly seeing people that were ill, and even if they weren't part of our congregation, it didn't matter. And in those days, people didn't go to the psychiatrist as much as they do now. And he played that role too, which I would say today is not a healthy thing to do. But he did. He was there for everybody. And he accomplished. Anne Campbell was the poet for the, I think it was the Sun Times. And when he died, she wrote a poem, and one of the things she said, what a pity that he died. She said, it's a wonder he had time to die, is the way she put it. And those are my recollections, which I can tell you many, many more of, but I think it gives you an insight into the kind of man he was. And this congregation grew by leaps and bounds at the time. He brought in people that, just by hearsay, he gave book reviews. He was there. He read. He was a prolific reader, and he knew what was going on in the world, and he spoke out. If he didn't approve, he was on that pulpit. And if there's one of the experiences that I do remember, we were going to up north in Michigan when we first came for a weekend, and I think it is there a place called Ramona or something like? I don't know. I don't remember the name of the place. And as we were registering and signing in, he noticed the sign there. It says restricted. When he saw that, he said, I'm sorry, I can't be a part of it. And he came back and he called up the newspapers and preached from the pulpit about these things. And they had to take those signs off. And I don't know whether they're still continuing, but I can tell you that he had a part in stopping that. And our first experience in trying to rent a house on Glen Court was also that way. We went in to see this man. It was the only house available that we could find at the time. And this man looked at my husband, and he was very entranced. He said, I'm Dr. Glazer. He didn't know he was a rabbi. And subsequently, he says, well, what do you do? And he says, I'm a rabbi. He said, well, you certainly are a nice gentleman. He says, but I don't like some of your loudmouth Jews. And that hit right below the belt. So I needn't tell you that we didn't rent that house. And those were the things that hit us at the beginning when we came. And it opened my eyes to what the world was all about. And I hope that there's been a lot of progress made since then. I sincerely hope so. I do think that this Ecumenical Institute that we have here is a forerunner. We're outstanding in the country. We have the largest one. And there are other institutes like it. But the response that we get is very exciting and very, very gratifying. And I'm thrilled that it's here. I really am. And I've been very much a part of it. I've never missed an institute either. I've been lucky. And it's going on now for 54 years. And he had the vision to start it. Mm-hmm.
That's great. Is there one special memory, maybe something amusing, or that you could maybe close with?
Well, I can only say that he died too young. It, needless to say, it affected me very deeply. It affected the community. It affected this congregation. I had two young children. That part of it was very, very difficult. I had no family living here in the community. And somehow or other, we've survived. We've made friends. I have two outstanding children of whom I'm very proud. And that's where they're very much a part of their father. They're very much a part of their father. And needless to say, it's sustaining me, is what I can say. And as far as the congregation is concerned, I think he will always be remembered by those who knew him, by the impact he made on their lives. And I hope with all my heart that the next rabbi that we get will have the same effect that my husband had on this congregation.
Anything that you can think of? Areas that we may have missed, or something else we could look at, or?
Unless we wanted to go anything about changes in religion and services.
I think it's changed very drastically.
Okay, are we rolling that? Okay.
I think the way Reform Judaism is going, has been a tremendous change. At one time, Reform Judaism, as I said before, I think was quite rigid. The emphasis was on sermons, on Judaism per se, without a lot of the, what should I say, can't think of the word I want to say, tradition. Today we're going back to a lot of the tradition, which is really symbolic, and I think has added a lot of warmth to the services. But I think what we're missing today is the rabbi's involvement in what's going on and relaying it or portraying it to the congregation. People used to look up to the rabbi, to the ministers, to interpret and convey to them what is right and what is wrong. I mean, there's so much that is wrong today. And when it comes from the pulpit, it's expressed, it does affect the person that is listening. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's lacking. I really do think so. And the services are different in the sense that they've gotten much more traditional, leaning much more to the conservatism. You know, there's the Orthodox, the Conservative, and the Reform. And there's still a large group of people that don't like that. They would like to have kept our old prayer book and just have had the kind of service we had, that they felt that Judaism doesn't have to be expressed with all the symbolism that is being expressed today. And some of them are very upset about that. On the other hand, now we have what we call the bar mitzvah and the bat mitzvah, which we've always had confirmation, and that was really a beautiful service, and they still have it. However, it has been minimized because of the bar and bat mitzvah services. And that has been a great innovation in the sense that it's a personal thing for each child at the age of 13, that they are brought into it's looked upon, way back they used to call it, today I am a man. I mean, they're growing up and they're taking on the responsibility of learning about Judaism and what they can contribute. And they learn Hebrew and they learn how to read out of our Torah. And it's very, very dignified and very beautiful. And I have to say that my husband was considering that before he died. He saw what was happening and that he felt that we would eventually bring in the bar and bat mitzvah service. And I have to say it's been very successful. And it does bring out the families and makes them feel a part of it. And the youngsters like it because they are personally involved and get the attention, which I think is important too. And the families too feel that it's wonderful. And the days of just confirmation, it was once a year, and everybody had beautiful receptions, and it was very effective and everything, and it still is. But it was a combination of they're entering into the fold, so to speak, into their responsibilities, but not on a personal level. It was a group response. And I feel that that the Bar Bat Mitzvah has been a great innovation. And things have changed as far as the services are concerned. It took a little bit of understanding at the beginning, but I happen to come from an Orthodox background. It hasn't bothered me, but it has bothered a lot of people. But they're learning and they're liking it, and there's much more involvement in the service and the singing and the responsiveness and everything, and I think that's a good thing. I really do. So that's that. Anything else, Freddie?
The only other thought would be a message for future generations.
Yeah, got some words of wisdom or some
Well, what I see, the young people today, even though they're bar mitzvah, they do get involved in their temples to some degree, but not to a large extent, by not going to services all the time. I know from my own experience, you get the impact, the feeling of being in a religious atmosphere. There's so much involvement in extracurricular activities that I think they lose sight of what the service is. Everybody comes out on our New Year's, the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, but during the year you don't see the response. However, the youth groups do a good job. They have camps for them. Some of our young rabbis now are inspired by what they learn in those camps, and if they're lucky, by their rabbis. And, it evens itself out. And the main thing is the whole purpose of religion is to be a good person. And I think that's the inspiration that we all hope that we can give our children, and also that they can be inspired by the right people. That's about all I can say.